So this Parsha is Ki Teitzei, and I have an idea that I heard from my Rosh Hashiva, and has I think, a very strong Rosh Hashanah connection from this week's Parsha, and it's hard to believe, but Rosh Hashanah is around the corner, so would be this is probably one of the most important themes that we need to go into Rosh Hashanah with, and I think in general, in terms of how we define ourselves and define people around us. I think a very, very important message here. I'll start with just a general question. I'm sure we've all given it some thought. Can people really change? Very often I come across people saying, that's who I am, that's how God made me. There has to be a capacity for a person to change behaviors. And we live more and more, and we see more and more abdication of responsibility. I think it's just, to me, I find it almost comical that we live in a generation that feel that we have a right to redefine ourselves however we want, and yet we keep falling back to, that's who I am. I guess they're arguing that that's who they were, and they're redefining themselves as who they really are. But the whole idea of tshuva and the whole idea of a notion that we can be rewarded or punished for our actions has to be predicated on the fact that we have a capacity to change whatever propensities we have. If you can't change those propensities, then you can't hold the person responsible for any of his actions.
So if there is no charat al-ava, there's no kabbalah al-atu?
I don't know. I mean, there are two elements. What F is referring to, there's two elements the Rambam says that are important in tshuva. Is one has to accept upon themselves to change for the future, but also has to be, you have to have remorse on the past. You can't, you have to have both. There's no impetus to change if you don't have remorse.
Is it stages or is it one?
No, it's stages. The Rambam brings it down to the stages. So let's take a look here. These happens to be, if you bring somebody, you sit them down and you show them the verses that we're about to read now. It's like when you start hearing about these stories about Scientology, something like that. How does anyone believe in that? It's like there are people that believe in it, but just like from the outside looking in, sometimes things seem to be very, very strange. Well, I think this is one of those stories that unless you get a good insight, it looks very strange. And what I'm referring to is the story of Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious child. So, I'll read through the psukim with you. It's interesting to note I'll leave that insight for a different time. But does Kia le'ish ben Sorer Umoreh? if a man will have a wayward and rebellious son, einena shomea b'kol aviv v'kol imo, who refuses to listen to the voice of his father and mother, v'yisru oso, and they will discipline him, v'lo yishma alehem, and he refuses to listen. V'savsu vo aviv v'imo, and his father and mother will physically take hold of him. V'hutzio, and they will take him out el ziknei iro, to the elders of the city. Vel shar makomo, and to the gates of his place. That's where the Beis Din was. V'amru el ziknei iro, and they will tell the elders of the city, B'neinu zeh, this son of ours, sorer umoreh, he is wayward and rebellious. Einenu shomea b'koleinu, he refuses to listen to our voice. Zolel v'soveh, he is a glutton and a drunkard. Urgamuhu kol anshe iro ba'avonim, and all the men of the city will pelt him with stones, v'meis, and he will die. V'yarata hara mikirbecha, and you shall eradicate the evil from your midst. V'cho Yisrael yishmu v'yira'u, and the people of Israel will hear about it and they will fear. All right, so what's going on over here? You have this kid, doesn't want to listen to his parents. This is quite a strict discipline over here, right? You don't listen to me. You know, we're going to have you taken out to the Beis Din and executed. So what's the pshat? What's going on here? So there's a whole chapter in the tractate Maseches Sanhedrin that actually deals with the Ben Serer Moreh. It's actually the name of the chapter is Ben Serer Moreh. It's a whole chapter.
Something that never happened.
So let's get there. So the Talmud discusses what does it mean that he is Zolel v'Soveh. We say, what has he done? He doesn't listen to his parents, and he's a glutton and he's a drunkard. So the Talmud says that he steals money to buy meat and wine.
By the way, it has to be kosher.
So the Talmud asks the question, okay, so the Talmud says we're talking about somebody that is already 13 years old. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier to understand. But the Talmud says, but if he steals, the punishment from stealing is not being executed. So he steals from his parents. The Talmud says that no. A person that has already got to the point where he's showing this type of an addictive behavior for these physical pursuits, it's going to snowball. It's not going to stop there. Right? So Talmud's addressing is that stealing is not capital offense. He says no. He's showing addictive behavior, and it's going to snowball, and it's going to get to a point where he's going to have become so aggressive to support his habit that he's going to actually murder someone eventually. So nidon al sofo. So we execute him. We're actually saving him from himself. We're executing because we don't want to let him get to a point where he will become a murderer and then he'll lose his olam haba. You know. Itself a very difficult concept. Right? But, as Effie pointed out, the most difficult statement the Talmud makes is the Talmud says that Ben Sora Mora lo haya. There was never a case of Ben Sora Mora. But not only that, the Talmud adds lo haya v'lo yiyeh. There wasn't one, and there won't be one. Now, to say there wasn't one, that's a historical fact. So they're telling you there never was one. You can make such a statement.
Except for the guy who said he sat on the grave, right?
Right. Because close to it, it wasn't a full case. But to make the statement that there wasn't one, you can make. How can you make the statement that there won't be one? That itself needs an explanation. There'll never be one. How do you know there'll never be one? You know, we could take a poll of the 450 families here. I'm sure there's a number of them feel that they have one of them. You know, it's not that there'll never be one. How do you make that statement? That's a very difficult statement to understand how you can make it. But then one of them goes on and says, well, if there was never a case of Ben Sora Mora, and there'll never be a case, when we have 15 psukim in the Torah discussing a situation that could never happen. Right? So Gemara says that it's here, drosh v'kabel schar. It's here that you could study and be rewarded for the study of it. So it's not going to happen, but it's here to study so you can get rewarded. So it needs a huge explanation. I mean, study so you can get rewarded for it. You know, so put a Dr. Seuss book in there and let's study that and get rewarded for studying it. Obviously, it means studying and get rewarded, meaning that there must be, although it can't happen, there must be verses here that are pertinent, that by studying it, that gives us a greater insight into the way we're supposed to live. Right? So even though it can't happen, there must be insights, and otherwise, what's the purpose of studying it so you can get rewarded? Not just because you study it so you can get reward, but the study itself is the reward. The study itself will create greater development of understanding, which we need to understand. So what is the greater development of these psukim that we just read? So let's just recap. Number one, the concept of Nidon al Shem Sofa is a difficult concept that you're executing him to save him from himself. Guy's just committed the sin of theft. Okay, he's not listening to his parents either. That's not a small avera, but that's not a capital offense. Right? But he's been stealing. It's not a offense that's punishable by death. But the behaviors show that that's the direction he's going to go. It's a difficult concept to understand. Second of all, if it's not in the Torah, if it's not going to happen, first of all, how do you know it's not going to happen? How are they so sure to say it? Never happened, you can say it. That won't happen. How do you know that? There's actually a remez in the verse. There's a hint alluded to in the psukim. Zev the Balkori, you'll see it. That where you know, you could see that it won't happen. Because there's a number of times in the Torah it says, V'chol Yisrael yiru Yishmu v'yiro, they'll hear about it and they'll be afraid. In the other places it says that V'lo Yosifu Od, and they will not continue. Here it doesn't say V'lo Yosifu Od. Why doesn't it say and they will not continue doing it? Because there actually was no case like that. So there's a remez to that in the reading of the verses. But itself, again, other than saying that, well, that's the remez, but why? Why can't it happen then? But let me tell you the question here that's raised by the super commentaries on Rashi. So Rashi here is the one that brings down the Gemara, it's a Sifri, that he's executed because of to protect him from continuing and doing it in the future. Rashi says, Ben Sora Mora Eino Chayiv Ad Sheyigno V'Yochal. He has to steal and eat. Tartim or basar, a certain amount of meat. V'yishteh Chatzi Log Yain, a certain amount of wine. Shenemar, like it says, he's a Zolel, V'Sove, he's a glutton and a drunkard. Uben Sora Mora Nerag Al Shem Sofer. He's killed about what's the eventuality. Higia Torah L'Sov Daita. The Torah is reaching, penetrating the final outcome of what this person's intents are. Sof Mechale Mamon Aviv, that he's going to deplete his parents' assets. Mevakesh Limudo, but he still needs the same fix. Actually, with these type of things, it gets worse. You need more and more, and he's not going to be able to continue stealing from his parents. He's have to steal from other people. Va'omed beparshas drachim, and he'll stand by the crossroads. Umelastem abrios, and he will mug the outside population, and ultimately is going to shed blood. Okay. Let me tell you the question that the commentaries, the super commentaries ask on this Rashi. And it's only the Gemara, actually. And it's from the reading that we do on the, I believe it's the second day. Hashem Pakar Asara is which day? First day? First day of Rosh Hashanah. First day of Rosh Hashanah. Hashem Pakar Asara, this is the reading. We know we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah for a different reason why we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but there are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Each day has its own reading. So the second day of Rosh Hashanah we read the Akedah. The Akedah is the binding of Yitzchak, which has a very strong Rosh Hashanah connection to it, because we invoke the merits of our forefathers in order to receive the protection, and Hashem should judge us with more compassion. And there's tremendous symbolism from the Akedah to the story of Rosh Hashanah. The ram that's horns get caught and that gets slaughtered instead of Yitzchak. That's the shofar that gets blown. There's tremendous allusions from the story of the Akedah to Rosh Hashanah. So to come up with why we read the Akedah on Rosh Hashanah, not that difficult to figure out. However, the first day reading is as follows. First day's reading is in Parshas Vayera, in the beginning of Bereshis. It says, Hashem pakad es Sarak asher amar vayas Hashem lesarak asher diber. Vatar sar vateled Avram ben v'zekunav asher diber oso Elokim. So it's Hashem remembered Sarah, even though she had been barren for so many years. She gave birth, and Yitzchak is born. Now, the Talmud tells us that remembering of Sarah happened on Rosh Hashanah. So you understand why you would begin with the story of her conceiving and giving birth on Rosh Hashanah. But that's the first 3 psukim of that laning. Right? In fact, the Talmud also says that Yosef came out of jail on Rosh Hashanah. There's a bunch of things that happened, but we don't talk about those things on Rosh Hashanah. We talk about this. This is the first 3 psukim. Then we go, and who do we start discussing? We start discussing the story of Yishmael. Yishmael had been born 13 years previously, and Sarah saw that Yishmael was, it says, metzachek, he was mocking. Talmud learns actually he was molesting, he was trying to cause him bodily harm, different things that Yishmael was trying to do to Yitzchak. And Sarah throws down the gauntlet, gives Avram a ultimatum. This lady has got to go. My son will not be raised in an environment with her son. Avram is reticent, is deeply troubled by this. Hashem says, listen to your wife. Kol asher tomar, whatever she tells you, shma bekolah, she's actually greater than you in prophecy. Right? That's what she told him. Yeah, she said, but you know, marriage 101, listen to your wife. Right? Sarah, Hagar had already run away one time. She got pregnant and she miscarried. Then she gave birth to Yishmael, loads him out on the donkey. This is all we read. And Avram gives him provisions, gives him water, presumably sending him back to, where was she from? Hagar was the daughter, the princess, the daughter of Paro. When Avram was in Egypt, and Hagar was so impressed with Avram that she said, I'd rather be a maidservant in the home of Avram than be a princess in the household of Paro. And she went and became a maidservant for Sarah. Sarah, seeing that she's not having children, let her maidservant take a status of giving birth to the son of Avram, which was Yishmael, and that's how Yishmael came into being. So she goes through the desert, and they get lost. And Yishmael gets a fever, and they run out of water. And Yishmael is dying. She places him down under one of the bushes, and she goes and stands at a distance, sits at a distance, turning her back. She says, I don't want to see the death of my son. My own Rosh Hashiva said, you see, that's not a Jewish mother. Jewish mother cannot turn her back on her child when her child is dying. But nevertheless, the angels, sensing that God is going to do something to save this child, the angels come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're considering saving this child? Do you know how many Jews are going to die because of Yishmael, who is the patriarch of the Arabs, from his actions and the actions of all of his descendants? You're contemplating saving him? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ba'asher hu sham. I judge him based on who he is now. What will be, that doesn't come into play. We only focus on the way things are now. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a miracle, there's a well, he's saved, the rest is history. And now we have how many Arabs running around? How many billions? 2 billion.
Out of the 7 billion.
Ba'asher hu sham, we judge them. Asks the Mizrahi, Eliyahu Mizrahi, one of the super commentaries on Rashi. He says, this contradicts what we'll see by the Ben Sora Amora. By the Ben Sora Amora, we're willing to execute this kid, Al Shem Sofo, because it's inevitable that's the way he's going to be. Right? For sure, 100%. Doesn't matter. Chances are that's going to be. Right? Yishmael? No, we have to judge him on the way he is right now. What he's going to be doesn't come into question. So ask the Mizrahi, what's the difference? Why by the Ben Sora Mora we say Nidon al Shem Sofo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves Yishmael Ba'asher hu sham, focusing where he is, not based on that's the question that is dealt with by the commentaries. They found a very difficult understanding philosophically how to reconcile these two things. So, the question I have also is, why is that the reading the second day, or the first day of Rosh Hashanah? I understand the first 3 psukim, you're reading Hashem remembers Sarah, that's very much within the spirit. Then we have to start reading about the story of the progenitor of the Arabs. Most important day, one of the most important days of our calendar, given a history lesson about how the Arabs came into being. It's an important message for us for Rosh Hashanah. Why is that our first day Rosh Hashanah? The reading of the Yontiv was already established from the Moshe Rabbeinu's time. Moshe tikkun lahem Yisrael that they have to read on each Yontiv something that defines the nature of the Yontiv. How is this defining the nature of the Yontiv? So that's what we're going to have to answer. Number one, getting an insight into the story of Ben Sarah that could never happen and never be. Why not? What is the message to us? How is the fact we're executing him, Yizrach's question, not contradicting what happened by Yishmael, that there Hashem saves him based on who he is, not based on what he will become? Why is that an important message for Rosh Hashanah? Analyzing the psukim and the drashas, the way the rabbis extricate information from the story of Ben Sarah Morer, also there's some very interesting drashas that are made that at face value, again, seem very difficult to understand. Let's go through some of them. Pasuk says that the Ben Sarah Morer is Eino Shomea B'Koleinu, that he doesn't listen to our voice. So the Talmud says that if the man and woman don't have similar sounding voices, then you can't be a Ben Sarah Morer. They both have to be soprano, they both have to be bass. What does that mean that they have to have continuous? It says, V'tafsu osa, they both have to physically seize him and walk him to the Beis Din. Says the Talmud, from here we see that if they're unable to hold or walk him, if they're crippled or they have limbs missing, can't become a Ben Sarah Morer. Why? Because you have to have both of them and seize him. Again, what's the insight there? What's the logic? Right? Says that they see and they hear him. If they're blind or they're deaf, can't be a Ben Sarah Morer. The parents are blind. What is the message here? What's the insight? So I think this is a tremendous, tremendous message educationally, and we'll circle back and see why this is an important message to define for us for Rosh Hashanah too. What the Talmud is teaching us, and how the Chachamim know that there can never be a Ben Sarah Morer, is because what the Talmud is saying, that in order for there to be a Ben Sarah Morer, you have to have a situation where the child is so rotten, so corrupt to his core, that he can never be extricated from his situation. He is so corrupt that it is as clear as day that this is the essence of who he is. It's not going to change. The reason why Chazal know that there'll never be a Ben Sarah Morer, it's a very simple reason. Because you'll never find a child that is so corrupt and so rotten to the core. Why is that? In order for that to happen, you have to say that the child's behavior reflects who he truly is. And you cannot attribute any of his behavior to extenuating circumstances, to things that are brought upon by the environment upon which he is. If you're able to say that this kid is bad, this kid is rotten, and it has nothing to do with any of the environment around him, then you can make him a Ben Sarah Morer. You know why you can't? Because there'll never be such a situation. As long as we can identify some of the mitigating factors, some of the contributing factors to his behavior, to the environment around him, there's still a window of opportunity that he can change. Because it's not innate. So if it's external, it can be changed. If it's innate, it can be changed. And it's never innate. There's always going to be an element that comes from the outside as well. Now, this is a very, very important distinction to be made, and if you walk away with anything, you have to walk away from the shir with this, and don't make this mistake, because that's the mistake of this generation. The external factor just mitigates the behavior and allows the behavior to be changed. It doesn't exonerate the behavior. You are still responsible for that behavior. All it means is that you can change it. But you can't blame the behavior on everything that's going on around you, which is what happens today, right? There's a billion-dollar industry that basically all you do is sit on a couch and blame your parents for this and blame your parents for that and blame the teacher for that and the school for that. And it's never your fault. It's always somebody else's fault of why things aren't. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying as long as it is external, yes, they contribute to it and it mitigates the impact of what you've done. But ultimately you are responsible, but there's a window for change. That's the difference. Okay. So now, let's take a look. What the Talmud is saying is the mother and father have to have the same voice. What the Talmud is saying, not that they have to sound the same. There can't be mixed messages. The number one factor in developing healthy, emotionally, socially, spiritually healthy children is shalom bias. Parents have to be on the same page. When there's conflict in the home, that does not bode well to the development of the children. They have to be on the same page. They have to have the same voice. That's what it means. There also has to be, the parents have to be viewed as role models. The parents have to be viewed as as authority figures. Unfortunately, and that's the reality, if a child will look at a parent as a nebuch, as something that's got something physically wrong, a physical defect, some things like, it's hard to establish that sense of authority figure. If the kid has to push around the parent in a wheelchair, that's going to be hard. Again, so if the parents have limbs missing, you cannot say that the child is 100% corrupt because the authority figure was missing. So there is a mitigating circumstance. Same thing, being blind, being deaf. These are all mitigating circumstances which allow us to say that some of the behavior of the child is due to environmental, extenuating outside of the innate nature of the child and not reflecting the innate nature of the child, which means that there is room to change. There's room to change. It's not a ben sorah mora. So we've answered how come they know there'll never be one. Because that utopian, the Torah is giving us the utopian situation. The utopian situation, you'd be able to find a ben sorah mora. The reason why there never is one, because there never is that utopian situation. There's always going to be outside forces that are going to impact. When you study it, you understand what we have to shoot for. We now understand what we have to shoot for to create that utopia. It might not be there, but let's get close. That's what the purpose of these psukim are. And now we understand why Yishmael is not difficult. Yishmael grew up in a house of conflict. His mother had to run away. His mother was fighting with Sarah the entire time. He grew up in a house of conflict. In a house of conflict, then you can't say what he was doing is a true reflection of who he is. Kadosh Baruch Hu does not allow him to die and saves him b'asher hu sham, based on where he is right now. What do you mean based on where he is right now? He's done terrible sins right now too, but you know what? It's not a true reflection of who he is. There is window for change. In fact, we find the Sof Yom of Yishmael actually did tshuva. At the end, he did tshuva. So there is room for change. Room for change, it's not Nidon al Sofo. He doesn't get punished for what happens at the end. He gets punished for he gets judged for where he is right now today. Because his true essence is still not corrupt. Ben sorah mora gets punished because that's talking about somebody whose true essence is corrupt. Can't happen, but there's no contradiction between the two. Think about what happens on Rosh Hashanah.
We know what we've done all year. And we know how many Rosh Hashanahs we ourselves have gone through. The reason why we read this is not because we need to know the legacy of the Arabs. Is because the message is even someone like Yishmael, God judges him the way he is at that point in time. There's room for change. Hashem, judge me the same way. I'm standing before you. I'm making a commitment. I want to change. I can change. It's possible for me to change. You know why? Because what I've done is not a true reflection of who I am. The idea of tshuva is I want to go back to who I really am. Everything else is a product of external things, but it's not who I am. I'm taking responsibility. Can't say I'm not responsible. I am responsible. I'm going to do the al-chetz. I'm going to take responsibility for everything that I've done. But judge me on who I am means that I have the capacity to change. Tshuva means you make that commitment, God will judge you with that ability to change. But I'm saying I have that capacity. The reading of Yishmael, the first day reading, shows no matter how bad it is, the person still has room to change. Judge me based kasher Hashem. It's a tremendous message to go into Rosh Hashanah with. But in general, it's such an important message when we deal with people, especially when we deal with children. Right? The mistake we make, and this is the mistake again, as I said, of this generation, is how many times do parents come and say, your kid did this. Well, it's because you put him next to that kid. Oh, that might have contributed to it, but that didn't make him do it. Take responsibility for what you did. You know what? But it can change. Let's see, maybe we can move him away. Maybe we can do things to help that it can change. It's mitigating. It doesn't absolve responsibility. Let's take responsibility, understand that we can change because there are mitigating factors. And that's the way to go into Rosh Hashanah. And please God, we go in with that message. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will judge us favorably coming to the next year.
Amen.